Hey everyone, in this episode we're going to wrap up our animation for our enemy by adding a melee attack state, so when the enemy is close enough to the player, it does a melee attack. Now before we jump into adding any states or any logic, we need to add an actual attack animation. As a reminder, we're using Mesh to Motion. This is a nice Mixamo alternative, completely open source. We've already added our fighting idle here for our idle state, and then for our walking state we're using this walk loop. Maybe bring that a little bit bigger so you can see it. Find a melee attack that you like. I think I want to go with this kind of overhand. It says a throw, but it kind of looks like an attack animation, almost like you're swiping. So I'm going to go with that. Now that we've added this new animation, we need to re-download this. This is going to give you a new GOB file, and you can just go ahead and replace the GOB file that we added in the last episode. I'm going to save that. I'm going to replace it. We'll go back to our project where it's being re-imported. And because that enemy file is just a piece of our simple enemy scene, overriding that GOB file is not going to change any of this other logic. So we just need to change that back so that it updates. And now if we go into our children here, we go to our animation, we have a idle, our walk, and now our new attack animation. Now that we have our new attack animation in there, what we need to do is add a new attack state. Remember, we're using our state chart. We're going to go to that, and then within our root, we're going to add a new atomic state. We're going to call that the attack state. So the idea here is that when they get close enough to the player, we're going to activate the attack state, and they're going to run the attack animation, and then we're going to handle all that damage stuff within the next episode. And then after the attack animation finishes, we're going to check again to see if they're still within range of the player, and then we'll just run the attack state again. Otherwise, we'll go back to the follow state until they get close enough to the player. We're going to add a new transition so we can get to that attack state, to attack, and we'll assign that to our attack state. We'll name this event to attack, that's how we call it. We need to go and add this animation logic and that state logic to our animation tree. Remember, we're using the animation tree to handle when these animations play, and we're connecting that to our state logic. We currently have a start, which goes immediately to idle, and then we go to our follow state, which is a blend between the two. Now the attack state is not needing to be blended in any way. It'll just be a basic animation for our overhand throw, although we should probably name that attack, and we'll be able to transition between those things out of the follow and transition back. So we have both ways, and it's freaking out. So you'll notice here that we have green arrows. That means this is an automatic transition, and we don't want them to be automatic. We're going to have a check, remember. So we'll switch these to enabled. Enabled means we're only going to advance this transition when we tell it to. And we do that by the travel function in our code. So we're going to switch both of these to enabled. They do have a space for adding conditions and expressions. I kind of like to just keep everything within the script so you don't have logic in two different places. But you can use that if you'd like to use that. But just know that we're going to take these transitions, set them to enabled so we can control when they actually happen. When they do happen, you'll notice if I press this play button, we go to our attack. Now you'll also notice if I press the attack state button right here, that switch is immediate and it does not look very good. We do have something, however, that can combat this, and that is up here in the upper right, and that is the X fade time. So if I click on the transition, this is a crossfade between the current state and the next state. So if I set this to something decently short, let's say like 0.2 seconds, and now we smoothly transition between the two states. You have to add it to both transitions, or coming back is also going to be immediate. So we'll go to attack. So the crossfade is another built-in transition blend that you can do without having to add a unique blend node to your state machine. You can also customize this transition with a curve. Instead of it being linear, you can do a new curve and set a preset, maybe do a smooth step. And you'll probably get a more noticeable change if I go to this transition. So we'll add a new curve, open that up, do a preset, and do smooth step. Sorry, that's cut off a little bit. But do a smooth step, and now attack. And that's already looking a lot better. So we've added our attack state and animation to our animation tree state machine. One more switch that you might want to make to your attack to follow transition, and that is how you switch. So Within this switch option, there's a switch mode, and there are 3 different options. There's immediate, sync, and at end. So immediate would switch to the next state right away. Sync is going to match up the playback positions between the 2 different states, and at end is going to wait until the attack animation is finished before it would ever think about transitioning back to follow. So that's actually the one that we want to use for this. This will be a lot clearer when we actually implement this in the gameplay. All right, so let's head to the script and actually get this working in game. So within our main enemy script, we're going to be adding a new export variable, and that's going to be for our melee range. And this is the range at which we're going to trigger our attack. That attack is going to be within its own separate function, our attack function. This is going to allow us to, if we wanted to attack at a special case, we can just call this function as opposed to it being tied to a state change. So I'm going to paste what I have in here and we'll go through it. First, when we attack, we're going to stop the velocity of the enemy. The enemy will stay put. We're going to do that to both the character body 3D velocity and the navigation agent velocity, just to clear those out. Then we want to make sure that we're facing the player. We can do that by checking that we have a target, the target being the player, get the direction to the player by subtracting the global position of the enemy from the global position of the player, and then normalizing that. We'll do some directional vector math to get the target rotation that we want for the player, and set our rotation to that target rotation. And then like we did in the last episode, we're going to get the animation tree state and then travel to the attack state. Remember, that's what we named our attack here. Then once that animation is finished, we're gonna check again for the distance to decide what we're gonna do. So check if we have the target still, that is the player. We get the distance to the target global position, and then check that distance against the melee range. If it's less than or equal to, go back to attack. If it's out of range, go back to follow, and we're going to adjust that logic in just a minute. Now, whenever we enter the attack state, that's when we want to call this attack function. So we're going to go to our attack state over here in the scene tree. We'll go to our signals and then do state entered, connect that to our main script. And then within that, clean that up a little bit, we will run attack. Now that we have the attack logic figured out, we need to adjust the follow state that's running every frame. So currently, if we run this, the enemy is idle. They're just standing there. We get close enough, they trigger, and they're in the follow state. That's just sort of how we've built this. They're always in the follow state once they've activated. Now, what we want to happen is once they get close enough, and I may need to adjust the 1 meter here, but once they get close enough, instead of sitting here, we want them to transition to the attack. So we need to check for that distance to the player in the follow state. So after we set the target position for our navigation, which is what we're doing for our nav agent, we're going to check our distance. So I'm going to copy this in here. So we're going to check if we're in the attack range. We'll do the same thing of getting a distance to the target. If that distance is less than or equal to the melee range, send event to attack. So let's go ahead and run this. It should run. It might be possible that our melee range is too short. So let's check it out. We'll go close. And yeah, I think the 1 meter is too short given the sizes of the enemy and the player. So let's go back and to the enemy script. I think I have the nav agent is the distance. Target distance is 3. This is a little big. Maybe we can make that a little bit smaller. So let's do 2 on the target distance. And let's set the melee range to 2, just so that matches. Actually, let's make it just a little bit smaller. All right, so 1.9. Now let's test this. So what should happen is we'll go up to the enemy. Once we get close enough, they should go into the attack animation. And we go up, and there we go. There's our attack animation. Now, if you want that attack to actually loop, that is, you're in the range of the enemy and it just keeps attacking while you're in that range, we need to make a couple of changes. First, instead of just doing a send event, let's just run our attack function again. So we just run that attack function when we're within melee distance. Then instead of just traveling to our attack animation tree state, let's check if we're in that attack state. If we're not, then travel to it. And if we are, just restart it. That way our animation will loop while we're in the melee range. And if we check that and go to our enemy, get close enough, we're in that attack range, Then attack is just going to keep looping over and over and over again. And then we move out of attack range, they move out of the attack state, and we're back in the follow state, and vice versa. Thanks for watching. Like I said earlier, in the next episode, we're going to make so that these attacks actually damage the player to kind of finish out that gameplay loop. We are going to be doing ranged enemies. That's going to happen, but I do think we need to kind of replace this ugly looking weapon box. So I've got one more episode to deal with the enemy mechanics, and then we're going to jump into weapons, get a good looking weapon in there, and add some juice to it. So as always, you can get the source files for this episode and any other episode in this entire project on my Patreon. Thanks for watching, and as always, keep creating.